In this video, we'll be looking at functions associated with CSV writing and reading. And in particular, we'll be looking at two functions, mcsvw and mcsvr. And the M stands for multiple, and the W stands for write. So it means multiple CSV write and multiple CSV read. Let's start with writing CSV, the mcsvw, because you're more likely in your analysis to write files before you will read them in. Okay. And here is a new project directory, and here we have the analysis script up. And it's often common that we'll have a data frame such as MD cars here, data set that we want to write out to a location. In this case, we're going to write out to the data directory in this new project template. So we'll run that. And then you would do write CSV empty cars, and you'd tell it where to go. And we see there that it's written to that directory now. The problem is often in word type analysis, where you're doing quantitative discourse analysis, you'll want to write out multiple CSV files at once. And you could go ahead and cut and paste this and do it again for every single data set that you have. But the problem is this is tedious and it just takes quite a bit of time. So what we have in the qdap package is mcsvw, again for multiple CSV write. Let's go ahead and delete those two data sets that we wrote, and we're going to go ahead and write them quickly. CO2 empty cars. And we can supply to it a location, otherwise it will by default save them to your working directory. So let's say dir equals out. We wrote them, and we see they went in there. And you can supply the main argument to mcsvw is the ellipsis, so you can just supply as many data frames to that as you wish. One thing you have to be careful of when writing out data frames, sometimes if you do choose to write out just one, a lot of the functions in qdap will actually write out data frames that contain columns that are actually, let's do str hold that all, and you can see here that we actually have lists within the columns, and so you want to be careful if you try to go ahead and write that out. Let's go ahead and write that to file path. Call it foo CSV, and we will get an error when we do that. So what we have to work with that is the condense function, and it takes those lists and condenses them together. And now we go to files, and we see that it was written as we intended it to. Okay, so these are your writing functions, and by default the mcsvw will try to use condense and will attempt to condense. So built within the mcsvw is the usage of condense. Now we can work with mcsv read, and this allows you to read in multiple files at once. Let's look at the help file for that. And we see that you state the files that you want. And so what you may want to do there is set wd, and we had x, actually what was our directory? We had created out was our directory. So what we may want to do is set wd to out. Then what we would want to do is dir out, and we can then go ahead and do mcsv read, and we can just do, just bring mcsv read down below here so we can see it. And what happens with mcsv read is it will read in those data frames and assign them to the, so over here in files, it will assign them to foo1, co2, mtcars, foo. And let's go ahead and do that right now. If we type foo not found, and we can see that it assigns to foo1, mtcar, co2, and also, so let's look at that first. Foo now is found. But another cool thing, if we look up here, was all 4 of these were actually assigned to a list as well. By default, it's L1. And it's, let's look at strl1 because it's easier to look at. We can see all our data sets are stored within one list, and that can be handy. Within mcsvr, you can set the L name, so by default it's L1. You can also set the A names, which by default it assigned them, as I said, to file names foo1, co2. And there are some other arguments that you can set as well. So this has been a video on how to read and write multiple CSV files at once.